Our next series of lectures will address process costing. The objectives that we're going to look at in this chapter involve understanding the difference of the costs that flow through a process costing system compared to the job order costing system that we've already discussed. We'll also look at how we calculate equivalent units of production in each process. We will look at the production cost reports using the weighted average method, and if time allows, the FIFO method as well. The journal entries for process costing are a little different than in job orders, so we'll take a look at those as well. And more importantly, we'll look at how we use the information flowing through these processes to make wise decisions. Once again, if we have time, we will look at the FIFO method in your appendix. So the first objective is to understand how the costs flow through a process costing system. How is this different than the job order costing system that we've talked about already? So if you remember, in our job order costing system, we looked at costs that are allocated by job. Remember, we had job 27, 28, 29. So these were typically companies that were manufacturing some unique product or a specialized service. Now, when we look at process costing, it's a little different. Instead of looking at cost by job, we are going to look at cost by processes, hence the term process costing. This is typically a system that is used by companies that are manufacturing identical units. If we're manufacturing bottles of soda, or as your textbook uses, crayons, Martha White flour. Okay, so we're identifying multiple amounts or significant amounts of identical products. And so in this situation, we have a process we have multiple processes, for example, that are taking place in the manufacturing process. So if we look at the difference, for example, in the job order costing versus the process costing, once again, job order, we're manufacturing unique or specialized products or services. In the process costing, homogeneous products. This means they are the same or identical, and we're using uniform steps or processes to manufacture these products. In job order, the costs were accumulated by job, whether we were manufacturing building A, building C, building D, or a different type of smart learning pad. In the process costing system, we're going to accumulate these costs by process. It might be mixing, bottling, packaging, but we will accumulate costs by each process. Now, when we were looking in job order costing, remember, we move materials, labor, and overhead into a work in process account. And in job order costing, we only had one work in process account for each job. In process costing, we're going to have a separate work in process account for each process that is taking place. And as we were accumulating those costs, they were taking place in a job cost sheet in job order costing. Here, we're going to have a cost report for each process, the mixing, the bottling, or the packaging. We were moving cost for each job. We were moving cost into work in process as the job was being completed. And when we completed the entire job, we moved all of those costs into finished goods in job order costing. In process costing, we really never finish the job. It is a continuous process. But at some point, we need to know the amount of cost in work in process, in finished goods, and in cost of goods sold. So at the end of every accounting period, we will transfer the cost from one process to the next, and ultimately into finished goods, and then into cost of goods sold. Okay? So basically, as we've mentioned, with a process costing system, we want to be able to identify the cost in each process or department, and to be able to identify ways that we can make that process or department more efficient. Okay, so if a product is costing us more than we thought it should have cost us, do we know if our inefficiencies are in the mixing, the bottling, or the packaging process? So this will help us to track those costs. It also helps us to be able to determine what our selling prices should be. Our selling prices need to cover our cost and the profit that we hope to recover or generate as a result of selling this product. And as I mentioned, we need to know at the end of every process how much is left in work in process, how much needs to be moved to finished goods sold and finished goods inventory, and how much has actually been sold. So this process costing system will help us to do that. So to take a look at this using T accounts, we see an illustration of the costs that we looked at in the prior chapter in job order costing, where materials, labor, and overhead were flowing to each job, 27, 28, 29, and then all of the costs move from job 27 work in process to job 27 finished goods, and then all of the costs move from that finished goods account into cost of goods sold when the product was sold. So this changes a little when we enter the process costing. Your book uses the example of Cheerful Colors manufacturing crayons. So if you'll notice here, material, labor, and overhead are being added to the mixing department. When the mixing process is complete, all of the mixing costs are moving into the molding department. But notice the molding department may get some additional materials, labor, and overhead added to it. But when we have finished molding the crayons and we need to package them, we will take all the cost, all the material, all the labor, all the overhead that went into the molding process, plus all of the costs that came into molding from mixing, and we move them into the work in process for packaging. At this point, obviously it would be a different type of materials that would go into packaging than the materials that went into mixing for crayons, but still in packaging we may need more material, more labor, and more overhead. So not only do we have the total cost coming out of molding into work in process, we're going to add any additional material, labor, and overhead that we have incurred into the packaging process as well. If this is the final process, when at the end of the period, we will calculate the cost that have been completed in the packaging process, and the total cost are moved as before in job order costing system, the job order costing system, into finished goods. They remain here just as in the job order costing system until those products have been sold, and then the cost will move to cost of goods sold. Okay, but once again, we need to know the total costs that need to move into finished goods and the costs that need to move out of finished goods to cost of goods sold when the product is actually sold. Make some notes and we'll come back and address learning objective number 2.